Hello there, private practice marketing mentors. I am so excited. My good friend Danny Ceballos is with us today. Danny is a leadership coach and consultant with Unleashed Consulting, and I've known Danny for a few years now. And we were talking the other day about this coronavirus and the pandemic that we have been feeling around the world, and started to talk about how so many practitioners are struggling with some sense of normalcy and the adjustments that we have all made to move our practices online, and the pinch that so many support folks are feeling in this, in wondering whether or not they're going to have a practice to go to when this is all over, and how we're all just coping in the meantime. So I asked Danny, and he graciously agreed to visit us today to talk about just that. And he's got some really great grounding techniques that he's going to share with us. But before we get started, first of all, Danny, welcome. And thank you so much for being with us today.
So excited. Thanks, Lisa. Appreciate it.
And I would love it if you could start off, before we get into your wonderful tips and tricks that you're going to share with us. I would love it if you could talk a little bit about what you're hearing from folks out there and what you're experiencing people are going through as a result of this coronavirus we're all experiencing.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So first of all, thank you so much for having me and doing this. I really appreciate it. And actually this, the conversation that we had that you're referring to is actually a reflection on what is going on and what I'm hearing from my clients. So as you said, I'm an executive and management coach. So I work with middle, senior, and executive managers, primarily in nonprofit, primarily in healthcare, but all across the country. And so finding it fascinating to hear the different perspectives that are, first of all, coming from different parts of the country. And then secondly, and I think this is super important, and we all realize this, today yesterday may have been last year. I mean, things just keep changing. In fact, I was just listening to our governor, I'm in California, our California governor talking about how things have dramatically changed, both for the good and for the bad, tragically, from yesterday. So it's incredible. So it's hard for me to pinpoint. I mean, if you're asking me what my folks were saying last week, it was a bit of a shock, trying to figure out how things are going. But depending on the part of the country you were in, it was hitting people differently. So, one of the things that I've been thinking about is I was just on a call before a little while ago, and we were asked what our element is, what element that we naturally associate with, whether it's fire, water, earth, or air. And I said that normally I'm fire. Normally I love being right there and taking care of things right away, but I'm finding that the idea of being more water and flowing with the thing, flowing with, not with the virus, but with the pandemic and how that's working is actually suiting me much, much better than being fire. So I'm fire right now. I'm excited to talk to you. I'm excited to talk to your Facebook group. But by and large, I think for all of us, in fact, I would say that that's one of the first coping mechanisms for me. The grounding mechanism is to think of myself more in flow and responding and staying with the stream as it moves, because otherwise we're going to get stuck. We're going to get stuck in our own, whatever that place is. And then you overlap it with, especially for folks that are listening to this that are therapists or psychologists, that we are all going through these different stages of whether it's grief, whether it is change management, whatever model that you look at. And so it's inevitable that we are going to, all of us, for different reasons, hit a low point. So, any kind of change curve basically says, we start here, right here, kind of level, and then we do a dip. And that dip is to be expected before we can come out of it. So, I want to say to you, and I want to say to folks that are listening, that if you're not experiencing that quite yet, know that you will. And that awareness can be part of what can be grounding for you. Because when it happens, you can recognize that it's part of what is, the research is super clear, the science is super clear, that we all go through this, we used to call it well, I'm not even going to say what we used to call it because it's just not great, but it's the valley of despair, if you will, right? So we're all bound to go through that at some point. So having that sense is kind of, I would say this is my the first thing that I would share with folks, and it's what I am hearing to varying degrees from people out there. That was a hell of a long-winded answer to your
No,
first.
no, no. It was great. And I think that you really kind of hit the nail on the head because, your first reaction to this whole thing when it first started was, oh, holy crap. I mean, what are we going to do now? And so,
That's right.
we found that a lot of people kind of scrambled a little bit trying to kind of with this idea like, okay, I got this. I got to move everything online. Okay, so we got our tunnel vision on things that we got to do next. Let's move everything online and then we're going to be okay. And then a lot of people started to move everything online and then they were there and then it was kind of crickets, right? Like, well, nobody made the transition with me. What are we going to do? Holy crap, here we go again. So you're right, it happens in stages. And I think for a lot of folks, they're at that point where it's kind of like, all right, well, I made the transition online and nothing is happening. Now what? Oh my God, now what do I do? So it happens in those stages. So as people go through those stages, how should they adapt to that? I mean, I'm hearing you say be flexible, and I think that's fantastic. But when you're frozen in fear, as you move through those stages, how do you adapt?
Yeah. And so I think that brings us right to where we want to go with this conversation, which is what are some simple things that we can do individually and with our clients to help them feel and to help ourselves feel more grounded. Because as the ground is shifting, which it's going to keep doing for the next few months, apparently, as the ground is shifting, we want to be able to hang on to a few things that are stabilizing for us, that we can count on, that we can lean into, that we can be comforted by, that we can be challenged by, but not to the same degree of challenge that the pandemic is forcing on us, but the kind of healthy challenge that actually makes us coming out of this better people. So, so there's actually I put together a quick document that I think you're going to share in the comments section. So I really want to encourage folks to take a look at that document. It's basically a one sheet that describes 4 different strategies that, Lisa, if it's okay with you, I'd like to talk through those 4 strategies.
Absolutely.
So this
you
is
go ahead and do that, and I'm going to try and pull that document up. Okay, so go right ahead.
Thanks. So folks, this is the document that Lisa is going to share, that she's working diligently on to share. And you see it's a pretty simple one. So I'm just going to call your attention to the pieces of it. So, the title of it is Telling in Itself. So what to do when we don't know what to do. So again, this idea of when we're feeling so untethered, what can we actually hang on to in order to get through this untethered time? So it's super important to have something to lean into, to hang on to, especially when everything just keeps changing. So the first strategy that you see here is ground and grow. So ground and grow. And so, and it's probably the most significant and high leverage of the 4. Now that's not necessarily true, but it's certainly one of the most significant out of the 4. And it basically says, why not pick this time that we're going through this craziness to work on something that will ground us? So specifically, what I recommend is to find what, it's actually referred to by Charles Duhigg in The Power of Habit, a great book, where he describes something called keystone habits. So a keystone habit is a small habit that we build on, we try and create a new habit, but it's a habit that actually cascades and has impact throughout the rest of our life. So for instance, it could be something as simple as, well, I'll tell you what I'm doing. So before the pandemic hit, about, well, 6 weeks ago, I started, and I guess the pandemic had already hit, but we weren't in this lockdown mode. I had started a 12-week training schedule for a half marathon. So to run a certain amount of miles every day, every week. And the half marathon that I was training for is canceled because it's in May. But that habit of running almost every day, it's a very specific schedule, is actually turning into something that it's challenging, but it's also beneficial, obviously. And it's something that, again, when the world is spinning and everything's crazy around me, that I know I am planning on that run for later in the day or the next day or whatever. I don't necessarily love that. So I'm not talking about necessarily a habit that you absolutely love, but, and Lisa, you'll understand this because I know you're a runner too. And I know it was an uphill battle to get to a place where you are now. But that challenge and that notion that there is something that I can hang on to is first of all, it's a keystone habit because it has reverberations throughout the rest of my life. It's also a simple habit. So not to get too confusing, but I really want to recommend that if you decide to go with this and develop a new habit, first of all, do a little bit of research about how habits work. And there's a lot of great books out there, The Power of Habit, The Atomic Habit, there's great stuff out there. But to understand a habit takes a stimulus and then the behavior and then a reward, all those three things have to be in place. But to pick one that is SMART, and I use the acronym SMART that probably some of you are familiar with. So my world is organizational development and business development. And so SMART goals are what I'm talking about here, a SMART habit. So a habit that is specific, that is measurable, that is attainable. That's a really important part, right? So don't do something that you're not going to be, that you don't have a reasonable chance of being successful at. So specific, measurable, attainable, realistic. Again, I'm not going to run a marathon, right? I'm not going to swim the English Channel. I'm not going to none of those things are attainable for me. They're not realistic for me, but running is. So realistic. And then the T is time bound, so that there's some time constraints on it. So that's an important way of looking at your keystone habit to ground yourself and to grow during this time. You know, at the bottom of the document, you're going to see it says, this won't last forever. Think of this as an opportunity, because it really is. I mean, there's awful, awful things that are happening. And no doubt we'll all be impacted more and more so as we go through the next few months. You know, it's inevitable that if you have a few degrees of separation from somebody who is affected by the virus, those degrees of separation are going to shrink pretty quickly. But why not use this time as an opportunity to gain new insights, to possibly grow in ways that you hadn't thought of before, and really consider it, it's not rose-colored glasses, but a reframe of what this time is, or an opportunity. So again, that's my first thing. So Lisa, do you have any thoughts or questions about that?
I did. I'm glad you asked. Yeah, because when I found, because I was somebody who was not a runner before and started and hated the first few months of it, just hated it.
Yep.
But when you get to the other side of it, I really identified with the other day when we had this conversation. You were saying, everything within you fights it. You know what I mean? And when you get past that and you make yourself do it anyway, at the end of it is just this really calming feeling that it's like, okay, the world makes sense now and I feel like I can deal with it.
Exactly.
Because I did it and I put it behind me and now I can focus. And it doesn't have to be running for everybody, whatever that looks like for you, when you make yourself get out of bed and do the thing that you don't want to do, whether that's tackling your emails or balancing your finances or whatever that looks like, all of a sudden things calm down for a little bit and you feel like you can handle it and it makes sense.
Exactly.
Is that correct? Did I capture that correctly?
It's Totally correct. Yeah. And I think you nailed it. And that idea, I mean, the habit may be just getting out of bed early, right? It doesn't even have to be followed by running or, knitting a sweater or, cooking this. It could be as simple as getting out of bed 15 minutes early, perhaps to do, I'm going to throw a couple other resources at you. So there's a great book. What's his name? I was just looking at it, by Hal Elrod, and it's called The Miracle Morning. And it's a really easy to digest book, and he has variations of it for depending on whether you're an entrepreneur or a parent or whatever. But he identifies 6 different things that you should do, or that one could do, that are actually best practices for capturing your morning. Because when you capture your morning, you capture your day. And when you capture your day, you capture your life. So why not use this pandemic as an opportunity to capture your morning? And he talks about, and Lisa, you're going to have to kind of rein me in, because otherwise I'll keep spinning all over the place. We want to make sure to get all 4 of these. But he talks about 6 different things that spell the acronym SAVERS. So to engage in silence, some time in silence, whether it's meditation or whatever. A is affirmation. So to spend some time in self-affirmation. V is visualization. So thinking about pretty precisely how your day will go. E is exercise. R is reading. And S is scribing or writing. So if you're struggling to figure out what's a good keystone habit to build on during this time, consider capturing your morning, getting up early, and practicing savers. You only have to spend a minute or 2 on each of the SAVERS, or you can spend longer. I tend to find an hour. If you can get up an hour earlier and practice these, and I'm telling you, it will set your day up to be phenomenal. And how wonderful if after this pandemic, you still have that habit and that way of being. So again, that's the ground and grow.
Absolutely.
Great.
Okay, I think we are on, is it number 3?
We're on number 2.
Number 2, I'm so sorry. I didn't
That's all right. No, that's all right. So number 2 is create context. And create context it's a little bit simpler to understand. Creating context is basically, how will you protect your growth during this time? How will you protect your growth, your sanity, your ability to be fully human, to be who you want to be during this time? And when I say context, I mean, so, whatever you're aspiring to during this time, make sure you set yourself up for success. So again, let's talk about running, right? So running is a keystone habit that I want to work on. How do I make sure that I set up the context to be successful? This is actually part of habit research as well. We know this works. So I do things like put out my sneakers and my running stuff, the night before, if I'm going to do it in the morning, right where I cannot miss it. Super easy to throw things on, tie my shoes up. In fact, some folks I know, and I've done this too, is wear your running outfit to bed. So you got no reason other than get your shoes on to get up. Make sure your coffee is set up if that's what you want. Make sure your water is set up. Make sure that the context is protecting the kind of behavior, is protecting and supporting the kind of behavior change that you want to engage with. So that's creating context. I hope that makes sense. And maybe it's not even about the habit, but however you want to be successful. So if you're working from home, for instance, I do a lot of work with folks who are trying to figure out how to best work from home in this new time. Make sure that you create a space and boundaries for that space. And space is physical space, but it's also time space where you can be successful. Do what you can to make sure that that happens. So I have an office mate, and she's not barking right now, but she tends to bark. And when that happens, although she's very stabilizing for me in a lot of ways, she's not necessarily conducive to my doing work. And so I'll put her out of this room that I'm in right now and close the door, and she understands that. So you need to do whatever you can do to create the context that will protect and support the new kinds of behavior changes that you want to make. Does that make sense, Lisa?
That makes perfect sense. And I think that there's so many folks going through that right now as they make that adaption, if that's the right word, to life at home, because there's so many distractions, and now all of a sudden the kids are home. And,
Yep. That's exactly right. Yeah. So to set up those boundaries and to really be one of the things, and it's, by the way, it's adaptation, I think is the
Thank
word.
you. Thank you.
It's missed
I knew it was wrong as soon as it came out of my mouth.
But yeah, so a lot of folks are finding that it's really hard to set up the boundaries of time. So I wake up in the morning, I get my computer on my lap, I'm still in my pajamas. All of a sudden it's 10 o'clock, I roll out of bed, I forget to, I don't even bother to change or put on work clothes. And all of a sudden our days and our work become all the same. So you really want to be careful with it. And it's so hard during this time to do this, but so important to set clear boundaries on your day, your work, your space, your time. So yeah. Again, and I know folks that if they don't stop at 5 o'clock, they will keep working, right? At the dinner, right? And so, right. And then the day and the night just kind of, everything becomes amorphous. Not good.
And then you get burnout and
Yep. Even during the best of times, Lisa, because I'm guilty of this too. When we're not during this time, this pandemic time, it's not a great thing to do anyway. To set up boundaries is super important. But now, especially because we're talking about how to tether ourselves to something that's stable and predictable, that includes the boundaries, the context, right? So it's not only the behavior, but it's the context. What's that?
I said, preach.
Yes, exactly. All right, that's number 2. Number three is dashboard your days.
I am sharing the screen periodically so folks can see your document.
Oh, okay. Oh, great. So dashboard your days is about building in some accountability so you can measure your success getting through that day. So whether it's a keystone habit or it's work or it's life, you want to make sure that you build in something that you can measure, that you can, and it doesn't have to be granular measurement, but it's about, was I successful? Did I do this well? And the best way that I know of doing that is to have somebody that you can check in with on a regular basis. So first of all, we should be doing this anyway, because it's so easy to become, when we're, at least right here in California, I basically don't leave the house. I leave the house to take my dog for a walk and go for a run, but otherwise I'm not leaving the house. So it's really easy to be solid, not solid, but to be in solitude. And that's not a good thing. So we should be connecting with people anyway, but to find somebody that you can connect with on a regular basis to say whether you were successful in your day is huge, right? And if you really want bonus points for this and a gold star, bookend your days and your work. And what I mean by that is to figure out where you're going to start, what you're going to do during the day. And then let's say Lisa's my accountability partner. I check in with Lisa first thing in the morning or whenever. She checks in with me and we say, this is what I hope to accomplish. This is what I plan on accomplishing this today. And at the end of the day, or it could even be an hour at a time, we check in again and we say, well, how'd you do? So, and it's not about Lisa holding me accountable to her, but it's about Lisa helping me hold myself accountable to myself. Right?
Yes.
Right. So it's super powerful technique. And all these are hacks, right? These are tricks, hacks, but they're efficiencies. They're ways of being efficient, productive, engaged, happy, and healthy during this time. So if you can bookend your day, dashboard your day, create a measurement, a metric that somebody can help you hold yourself accountable to yourself on it. Gold star, big points for that.
Absolutely. So before we move on to number 4, because I know we only have a few minutes left here,
Yes.
but just to recap, what I'm hearing you say so far, and I just think it's brilliant. While this pandemic has forced us into a situation where we are required to be flexible, there still needs to be a level of structure and accountability that takes place in order for you to keep your head above water.
That's right.
Is that correct?
That's exactly right. And the water analogy keeps coming up over and over again. So, water needs a container, right? Otherwise, it's all over the place. Maybe it even evaporates and goes away. So we want a container while we are being flexible, while we are being water, because otherwise it's a friggin' mess. It's a, you know, it's a free, it's like dumping a bucket of water and it just goes everywhere. So yes, to be flexible, to stay in that moment of being in the, like a stream, like what flows, we go with it, but to have boundaries and structure, um, makes sense because otherwise none of this will work. And it also, it's helpful for us to stay sane. You know, everybody's telling everybody else to stay healthy, you know, stay, but I say stay healthy, stay safe, and stay sane. We need to keep our sanity and our wits about us during this time. And the best way I know of doing that is to create habits, structure, and something to hang on to.
Absolutely. And just to reinforce your point, and I don't want to cut too much into your
Wow.
time,
Yeah.
but last week here in Michigan, most of it took place last week. Last week, the governor shut the state down, and so last week, I was water. Nothing but water. I was like, I'm just going to go with the flow. I'm going to be flexible. I'm going to be peaceful. I'm going to be calm. It was nothing but calm. No structure in my day at all, and totally being flexible had
Mhm.
the opposite effect.
Hmm.
I mean, it was like all over the place. I wasn't getting anything done. I found myself getting more and more frustrated. And so you really do have to have both. You have to have the
Yeah,
flexibility to say, I can go with the flow, but I need to get these three things done today.
that's, yeah, brilliant. Yep, exactly. And three is a magic number, actually. So good on you for picking that number. Yeah. In fact, if you, you know, as you're planning your day, and we're actually going to get into this in the last point too, but as you're thinking about your day and you're visualizing your day and you're planning your day the day before, by the way, so before you go to sleep, you should really be planning your day for the next day. You should really be clear on that. Don't pick more than three big things that you want to accomplish, right? So there's, of course, there's a billion other things you want, but pick three. That's the magic number that the research says, the science says is manageable, doable, all those things. I actually find three a little bit, every time I plan three, I only get one or two done. So it's actually, it's more aspirational than anything else, but don't go any more than three for the big pieces. So the last piece, and I'll be quick about this, this last piece is manage your mornings, right? And we already talked about that, the importance of figuring out a structure for your morning, because when you capture your morning, you capture your day. And, you know, there's another great concept called Eat That Frog. It's a great book about procrastination techniques or avoiding procrastination. And you want to eat that frog. So meaning that, and it comes from a Mark Twain story, but the thing that you don't want to do, whether it's running, or whatever at work, the email, the report that you got to do, eat that frog as early as you can in the day. And the uglier and bigger the frog is, the quicker you need to eat it, the faster you want to lean into it and get through that. Yeah, and again, it's a Mark Twain story. So if it sounds confusing or gross, it's about boys challenging each other to eat a frog. And they finally say, well, if I'm going to eat it, it's going to be the ugliest one there. So anyway, so manage your mornings. Again, because that's some of the structure. And again, the research is super clear about when people, you know, the best artists, scientists, philosophers, business people, you know, Oprah, Deepak Chopra, all of these folks engage in a very specific morning routine, which tends to be about the savers, those 6 different practices. So do what you can. Everybody should be doing what they can to really leverage their mornings, because that's part of the grounding that can happen for us during this time.
It sets the tone for the rest of the day, doesn't it?
Totally does. Yeah. And for the rest of your life in a lot of ways, for your week, for your life. So whatever you can do to master your mornings, highly recommend.
Listen, Danny, thank you so much for offering your brilliance to everybody. I'm so grateful for you. I love you, my friend. You are just such a wealth of knowledge for everyone
Huh.
in an incredibly challenging time. So thank you for helping all of us to navigate our way through this. Where can folks reach out to you if they need to get a hold
Oh,
of you?
great. Thank you. Yeah. So my website is unleashedconsult.com, unleashedconsult.com. And if you want to write to me at danny@unleashedconsult.com.
Thank you so much for being with us today. I know that I've learned a whole lot. So thank you again for sharing your knowledge with us. And we will be talking to you soon. So everybody, hope this was helpful, and looking forward to talking to you real soon. Take care. Bye for now.
I know.